Welcome back to Homework Up with Miss Gore. Today we're going to be talking about our Unit 9, Day 3 homework, solving quadratics by completing the square. So today we're just talking about another method for us to solve quadratics other than factoring and other than using square roots. Now I really can't use square roots here because there is a b value. So when I am told I have to complete the square, then I'm going to have to use this process regardless if it's factorable or not. So the first thing I want to do is I want to rewrite this so that my c term ends up on my other side. So I'm going to rewrite this as x squared minus 4x plus a blank equals 12 plus that same blank. Now off to the side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little box and I am going to complete my square. So if I have an x squared here, and I know that my two middle terms are going to have to add to negative 4x. What I want to do is I want to take my negative 4, I want to cut it in half, and I want to square it. So I know that I want a 4 on both sides, giving me a negative 2x here and a negative 2x here. So I know that I have an x minus 2 and an x minus 2, giving me a 4 on both sides, now giving me a perfect square trinomial of x minus 2 squared equals 16. So I'm using my box here to solve this. Now that I have something squared, I want to undo that by taking the square root of both sides. My square root is going to eliminate my squared, so I now have an x minus 2 equals a plus or minus 4. I'm now going to add my 2 to both sides, but I do need to be careful because this does give me two possible answers. If I have positive 4 plus 2, that gives me 6. If I have negative 4 plus 2, that gives me negative 2. Both of my answers being acceptable. Number 2. Okay, so again, I'm going to set up my equation by moving my 40 to the other side. I now have an x squared plus a 20x plus a blank, because I don't know what's going to help complete my square yet, equals 40 plus that same blank, because again, I'm going to add the same value to both sides of my equation. So let's make a little box. And what I'm thinking about is, what is it that I'm going to have to fill in? I'm going to take my number here, I'm going to cut it in half, so a 10x and a 10x. And I think about what am I factoring out here? And what I need is I need a 10, and I need a 10. I need a perfect square trinomial. That then tells me that I know what goes in this spot here, and that's going to be 100. So I add 100 to both sides, 100 to both sides, and now I'm going to factor. I know this is a perfect square trinomial, so x plus 10 squared equals 60. Now to undo this, I'm going to take the square root of both sides, giving me x plus 10 equals plus or minus radical 60. Now radical 60 does break down using a factor of 4, so I have x plus 10 equals plus or minus 2 radical 15. I now need to isolate my x value, so I'm going to subtract 10 from both sides. My answer giving me x equals negative 10 plus or minus 2 radical 15. That is my final answer. I now want to move to question 6. Okay, so question 6, again, I'm doing the same exact process. So in question 6, I'm moving my 2 to the other side. So I have an x squared plus a 3x plus a blank equals negative 2, again, plus my blank. Now, off to the side, I'm going to complete my square. I know I am looking for a perfect square trinomial, so I'm going to take my 3 and I'm going to cut it in half. So I know that this is a 3 halves x and a 3 halves x. So I've got an x. I've got my 3 halves x. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't want an x there, just 3 halves. Sorry about that. On the other side, I have an x. I've got my 3 halves. And now what I need to do is I need to complete my square. So that tells me that I'm going to take 3 halves and 3 halves, I'm going to multiply those together, and I'm going to get 9/4. So I am adding 9/4 to both sides of my equation. So now when I factor this, I know that this is a perfect square trinomial. So I have an x plus my 3 halves squared equals, now if I add -2 and 9/4, I get 1/4. I'm going to then take the square root of both sides, giving me x plus 3 halves equals plus or minus. Now the square root of 1/4 is a perfect square. That gives me plus or minus 1/2. I'm then going to isolate my x value by subtracting 3 halves from both sides, giving me 2 possible answers. So if I do positive 1/2 minus 3 halves, okay, so that's going to be -1/2 minus another half, that's going to give me -2. If I have positive 1/2 minus 3 halves, that's going to give me a -1. All right, let's talk about number 10. Let's set that one up for you, and I'll have you finish that one on your own. We are converting 70 miles an hour into feet per second. So we are going to start this off by using a starting with a fraction, 70 miles over 1 hour times, draw your line. I am now looking for a conversion that is going to get me from miles into feet. So I've got miles on the bottom, feet on the top, and I will let you fill in the conversion for that. Times, draw a line. If I'm trying to get hours into seconds, I'm going to put hours on top, and my hours are going to easily convert into minutes first. I will then, you can fill in those numbers later. And once I have minutes on the bottom, I need minutes into seconds. I'm going to put minutes on the top, over seconds on the bottom. Now that I have feet per second, I'm going to multiply across. I'm going to find my answer. Hopefully that helped you along your way. Have a great day.